Welcome to the Next Mountain podcast. If you're new here, welcome. This is where we talk about post-exit transition, finding your purpose, and having a positive impact. Today, we're talking with Sami Inkinen, a Finnish-American serial entrepreneur and the CEO of Virta Health. We'll talk about his first mountain, from growing up in Finland to becoming a successful entrepreneur in Silicon Valley and reaching an IPO, to finding a bigger purpose that led him to founding Virta, a company focused on reversing metabolic damage. So without further ado, let's get started.
All right. Well, hi, Sami. Welcome to Next Mountain.
Well, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Alphonse, would you like to get us started?
We are speaking to entrepreneurs, some who are exiting, some are thinking about exiting. Maybe you just tell us about who you are, where you're from, and maybe give us an idea of like the background of your early life and how it led you to starting the business that you exited.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess briefly going back to once upon a time. So I was born and raised in Finland on a farm in a really good family, but not a lot of role models for building companies or even living in America. In that, my parents did not even go to high school, and so grew up on a farm. Yeah, was good at math and physics and got into computers early. So my formal training actually is in physics, and I started my career in a nuclear power plant back in Finland in my 20s. So that was my first real job. But then to kind of put the long story short here, in terms of my entrepreneurial experience, so I came to America 2003. So I've been living now in the US for 22 years. And over the last, I guess now 22 years, I founded one company that went public in 2012, so Trulia, and then merged with Zillow Group when they acquired us for $3.5 billion. So that was an amazing journey as an immigrant to build something from scratch and create a product that tens of millions of people are still today using. And obviously, the company was financially very successful. Investors were very happy with the outcome and employees as well. And now over the last decade, just about 10 or 11 years, I've been building another company, which is Virta Health, on a mission to reverse metabolic disease in 1 billion people. So pretty different from a real estate website, if you will, but still kind of like a technology company. And Virta is a private company, but it's a decent scale, hundreds of millions in revenue now, and sort of pre-IPO company, if you will. So that's a little bit about my professional background and growing up, and then very, very briefly, father of two girls, which probably, not as probably, is certainly the most important role for me as a human now, 8 and 10-year-olds, and married and living in Colorado.
Wonderful. And you moved to the U.S. with your wife?
Not quite. I was in my 20s when I came to America, and I was not married, and my wife is American, so I met her 2008 and got married 2010. So America has given me a lot.
Yeah.
House and built two companies and amazing life experiences.
So maybe going back a little bit to the founding of your first company, we're speaking to a lot of people through this podcast, but actually, I think you're the first person we've spoken to who took a company public. So when you started that company, did you have that end in mind, or did you think about building something you would sell, or like what was the genesis of that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say that even the word exit in the context of companies, it makes me kind of cringe. I don't like it at all because I've never really even thought of that. And the reason I say that is I feel very lucky in that I feel like I've never really even worked in my life by a traditional definition. And what do I mean by that? I feel like I've always followed something that's been exciting to me, and I've built that or tried to make it happen or try to create something from scratch. And that's all the way to when I was a kid, got into computers, and I ran one of the first BBSs, so pre-internet bulletin board systems in Finland. It was just fun for me, and I made a little money in the process there. So in terms of Trulia, why wasn't it a job? Why wasn't I thinking of exit? I was an immigrant fresh off the boat in America. I came to America through Stanford Business School, but that wasn't really the reason. The reason was I wanted to be in the Silicon Valley. I felt Silicon Valley is, for entrepreneurs, it's like Hollywood for actors and actresses. Like that is the place to be, and I wanted to be there. And I got there thanks to getting to Stanford. So when I came out of Stanford or was about to come, the driving force was I want to build something. I'm here in the heart of Silicon Valley. You know, if I get lucky enough and can build something, anything that's useful for others, that's it. And so that was really the catalyst on North Star and the driving force. The fact that Trulia ended up being an online real estate marketplace is almost like secondary. Sometimes I've said it could have been an online pet food company. Literally. It just happened that me and my co-founder, we sort of discovered, or it was an observation that online you can find a spouse, Match.com, you can buy a car, you can buy airline tickets, Expedia, but at the time, 2003, 2004, there wasn't a place to, or there wasn't a consumer-focused destination to figure out what to buy, what to rent. And we're like, all right, well, that's definitely going to happen. Somebody is going to do it. Why not us? But that was the catalyst, like build anything. And once we saw that there's an opportunity, it was just exciting, captivating. I remember literally, because I can't sing, but I remember singing in a car driving to the office almost every month for the first couple of years, just because it felt like a miracle. Like immigrant in America, somebody gave money to build this, and here we are building stuff in Silicon Valley. So
That's wonderful. So you had a big dream and slowly you started making it real, making it
yeah,
happen.
and honestly, obviously we're talking about transitionings and exits as part of this conversation, key part of the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
There was zero thought in my mind of end. Well, wasn't even a thought in my mind. In fact, sometimes I think about it is because, obviously people like to ask, like, what's your exit strategy? Like you're building a
Yeah.
company if you
Yeah.
have interest. And I've said it's kind of like getting married with someone and then you asking or somebody asking, what's your exit strategy? No, the point of getting married is that there is no exit. This is it.
Yeah.
Now, sure, things may not work out, though something may happen. It's the same thing in a company. I honestly, that's how I think about it. So obviously, I've started now 3 companies and running the third one right now. But I honestly, that's never been kind of the plan. Okay, I'm going to start this and then, oh, let's think about an exit. Actually, no. It's like, I'm going to start this and if all goes well, it's going to be the next Boeing or Microsoft or Google or whatever my role might be in that journey. But exit is not really in my vocabulary in that sense.
Mm. And so how did you live through, let's say, the divorce part? Or like, yeah, how was that when it started happening and unraveling? How was that like? Yeah.
Well, with Trulia, after not quite a decade, but not far off of, once we got to a point where, we had built the product and many iterations of it, we had literally, and still I think they have tens of millions of users. Company was, in a pretty large scale financially, was profitable just about. We had created not quite, close to 1,000 jobs. I was like, we've done it. Well, together with the team, but in terms of my own dream, build something from scratch, something useful, have users, customers. I was like, well, I did it. I've done it. And again, not me, obviously, with the team, but that was the driving force. That was a motivating factor. And then once it was done, I actually I was sort of losing, like, why am I actually doing this now? Like where it's going? And there wasn't a larger mission, at least in my mind, other than I want to build something, make it useful, and then it felt like it was done. And so as we entered the IPO process, which was, again, it wasn't really an exit for the company, but it was an evolution, the stepping stone. I said, I think my job's done here. And so I stepped away from an operating role at that point and stayed on a board as we went through the IPO process. And then the company went public. And then, a couple of years later, obviously there was an actual ending to the Trulia as an independent company when Apple acquired us. And so that was kind of then really like closing the book as a chapter in my life in many ways.
And so what surprised you at that point?
Once kind of the acquisition happened and when
Yeah.
all that. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I kind of had, I guess, 2 points. So let me describe the 2 points and then I can share kind of what happened. Obviously, the first point was when I had left my operational role and the company actually went public. So that was, obviously it was a big milestone. Like, okay, we're here to stay and self-sustaining company. And in order to go public, you usually need to have real substance. And then, I had more or less no savings. And so then company went public and I was able to sell my holdings. So suddenly I was essentially independently wealthy, so I didn't have to worry about that. And so that was kind of a one event, and I can talk about it in a second, that experience. And then about a year after that, obviously the second event when the company itself was then acquired and bought. And that was a whole different experience because I was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in a rowboat with my wife rowing from California to Hawaii, unsupported, and I get a text message to my satellite phone that, we are being acquired. What do you think? Do you approve this as a board member? And then that was kind of the real ending moment, if you will. So I had sort of two of these moments. But let me go to the first one, the former one, which probably, well, emotionally both were, maybe for obvious reasons, very charged moments. But the first one was more significant, I would say, because once Trulia went public, I had essentially left a full-time job. So I didn't have anything to do, to be very blunt. And then a company goes public. That was an incredibly disorienting feeling. And I think the moment that probably best characterizes it is we were living in New York with my wife, and I was 100% in control of my time and calendar. There's like no responsibilities. Obviously, as a board member, sure, it's a responsibility, but you're talking a couple of hours a week. And, pretty much newly married, couple of years married, and no kids, and in the bank, and everything's perfect, healthy. And I just remember one morning walking to a gym at 10 o'clock in the morning or something and just being incredibly unhappy and anxious about the silly stuff, household stuff that wasn't working, and almost spiraling into not quite the panic attack, but just this realization that, wait, this is what the kind of the society sells us, independent of anything and everything. You're financially independent, and maybe you have a spouse, maybe not. Luckily, I had. This is the pinnacle of some sort of a success, and now you can do anything. Well, do anything and completely independent of everything, at least to me, turned out to be the most miserable experience. And I want to be clear, that was never like my dream or goal. I just sort of accidentally ended up there. That wasn't the point of building the company Trulia. But being in that space it's a very unhappy space for me at that time. And, it led to a lot of things, positive things. But I think the biggest realization for me was that, one, I had never had the space to be alone with my thoughts because I was positively busy with the next carrot or cheese in front of me. Not sort of economically, but like, oh, it's a Tuesday morning, 1,000 things to do, and they're kind of fun things to do, and you're never like alone with your thoughts. And that was a scary place to be. I was like, well, clearly I'm not in control of my mind. I don't even understand my mind because it's taking.
What is happening right now? Yeah.
So that was one realization. And the other realization was that, like, having unlimited optionality is kind of at least to me, was a bag of goods that has actually no value. In fact, it has negative value, although it's sold as like, imagine if you could do anything all the time, every day. It's
Yes.
horrible. More beautiful, I mean, something that you say yes, and then you say no to the 99.9% of the things. That is a way happier place for me.
Well, and you're saying it in a way that's as if it was very personal and only you, Sami, but that's what we see. And when we tell people, they don't believe us. They're like, what? No, all I want is to have free time and all the money. And we're like, well, you're going to be miserable. but let me let me have other people teach you and show you because of their experience. So thanks for sharing. And you're
Yeah.
pointing to something that we're really learning too on the ground, which is what the energy of the entrepreneur, the capacity to build and to do and to be in action, is the opposite of what's needed to be in a transition. Because in a transition, it's more about being and letting the emotions emerge and listen to them and the thoughts and connect, not so much being in action, right? And so it's something difficult to do when you're an entrepreneur. And so you were more vulnerable to that situation.
Yeah, and also you explain very well. It seems you were always connected to that inner core, inner motivation, which is like I like doing, I'm having fun, this is exciting, and as you mentioned, we're often sold the idea that entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because they want to get something outside, because they wanted the money or the fame or the status or the power, but actually, what we see meeting entrepreneur is actually like that's your nature. You want to take action, you see problems, you want to turn them into opportunities. So what was the process to get to the next like business that you started building? Was it something different, or that how did that you came out of that disorienting place to find a new project?
Yeah. It was about, let's see, there was about a year and a half period that I was not full on building Virta Health. So it was kind of a year and a half process where lots of things happened, but to try to distill it a little bit, and a little bit for context. So one is coming out of the Trulia experience, despite having that sort of negative emotional experience of empty space, I was not looking forward to starting another company because it was a little bit of like, I don't know, what would be a good analogy. You run a marathon and sure, it's super awesome, but you finish and your muscles and legs are 100% destroyed. And then somebody whispering, let's run a marathon tomorrow. And you're just like, I am so in bits and pieces. There's no way I want to run a marathon. So I was very kind of trigger shy to even like that. That was not the thing that I want to jump into immediately. So I think that's one piece of context. The second one was, I think I got somewhat lucky that I sort of stumbled on a North Star, a very broad North Star. And that was throughout those Trulia years, I'm still endurance athlete and even won the world championships in triathlon as an amateur in my age group the year before Trulia went public. So very, very fit in that sense. But despite all that, I found out that I was pre-diabetic and I guess slowly getting towards type 2 diabetes. And so basically metabolically unhealthy. That's a metabolic disease. So that or solving that or understanding that sort of became a North Star. I was like, this is ridiculous. I think there's something there that is not fully understood. Or at least it's a confusing space. Meanwhile, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, in fact, billions of people are metabolically unhealthy and suffering from diabetes. And it truly is the health epidemic of our generation. So I'd say the second piece of context is I kind of had a North Star. I was like, there's it's a big problem. Somebody needs to solve it. And if a world-class triathlete is kind of getting into that poor metabolic health, then everyone's like there has to be something. And so what I ended up doing was I said, I became curious, I guess. I want to understand what is going on here. So I started meeting with, scientists, clinicians, people in sort of this health ecosystem to understand what is happening there. And then eventually I kind of stumbled on, it sounds very simple, but type 2 diabetes, obesity, metabolic disease. First of all, it is a disease, but it's fundamentally a food problem. It is a food problem, and you can't solve a food problem with drugs. although they may be helpful in some cases. But it's fundamentally a food problem. And so I realized that that is the problem, and then narrow it down from there, like, so in what way and this and that. And so one thing I actually learned in the process was, at least for me, and I think this is true for most, it's one thing to just think about, like, oh, I'd love to do that, and how should I do, and, have some PowerPoints or Google Slides or whatever. But that's not the real world. It's kind of like the old saying that Mike Tyson saying, like, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, and then the plan goes out the window. So I realized that, okay, well, this is the problem. And I kind of understand what might be the solution. I need to go and do something, to have fun again, to do something, and then learn in the process. So this specific row, which we call fat chance row with my wife, rowing from California to Hawaii in the summer of 2014, was one of these things that let us go and do. So we wanted to show the world that you can do that with no sports products and sugars and Gatorades and kind of whatnot, just with real foods. And so that was my process of, I accidentally kind of stumbled on something that I was very curious. I was like, oh, this is the kind of stuff I'd like to study on a Saturday afternoon on a beach. Although I don't like beaches, but as an analogy. And then I thought, well, I don't know if anything's going to come out of this, but let's do something. Let's have a project or something useful. And with this role, we raised lots of money for nonprofits to fight against poor nutrition and sugar, and so that was kind of my process. And so there was no formal, like, okay, I want to start a company, steps ABC 1, 2, 3. No, it was kind of the opposite. It was like, this is the problem I'm interested in, even if I didn't get paid, and I want to understand, and maybe there's a way to solve this, and let's take some steps 1, 2, 3 and have fun in the process. And if it leads to something, then great.
It's great. You're pointing to a few key ingredients to actually be able to connect with a passion that might sound initially a little bit crazy if you think of it in a more linear, traditional way, but it's actually what will bring more joy and fulfillment to you in this case, right? And so it sounds like you were creative. You're allowing yourself to be creative. You're not trying to find something smart to do, but more like, how can I contribute? How can I play here? How can I be creative and do something, be in action? But for example, you were not thinking, how can I make money out of this? Because many of the entrepreneurs we talk about, when they're thinking of their next mountain, it's like they're still looking at it through the lens of business, even though they don't necessarily need to make money, but it's almost like that's the way to do things, right? And so I'm curious, is there, you've shared already so much in terms of how they can lean into their passions, but anything that helped you, anything that made you dare to take those choices?
Yeah, it is interesting you said, and I have a lot of friends who kind of have sold a company or something and made a lot of money, and then they go and buy a totally random business. It's almost like that is the game, and nothing against, if that's your passion, like, it's a game, rather than playing, I don't know, soccer or ping pong or tennis or whatever. The game is the game of business, and then people go and buy some random thing that they don't even care, but they just want to play the game. And if that is the passion, great. That's actually never been my passion. I do like business in general because it's like the fabric of society. You are involved and this and that. But in the case of Virta, I literally, to me, it was, okay, metabolic disease is a problem. Then when I kind of discovered through the scientists, like, this approach might be the solution. After that, I went through the thinking, kind of analytical thinking. How do I get this solution into the hands of as many people as possible? And I went through, okay, so this could be a tweet, or X now, or it could be a book, or it could be a nonprofit, or it could be something else, or it could be a for-profit company. So my process was, what is the best tool to solve this problem? And I ultimately actually pretty quickly concluded that for-profit company is the best vehicle. I can attract the capital, I can attract the talent, and in our case, because we cure disease or reverse metabolic disease like diabetes, get people off insulin, it saves crazy amount of money. So there's an easy, well, nothing's easy, but It's like an economic model waiting. It's like, hey, if you can help somebody make money or save money, you can probably create a business out of it. So that was my process. So the fact that Virta Health, which, I've now raised 360 million in investor capital, and like I said, it's in pre-IPO scale and all this, that just followed it followed from the thinking, what's the best vehicle to solve the problem? Not that I want to start a business.
Right.
And sometimes I say internally that we are, because there's a lot of companies that are basically for-profit companies disguised as a mission.
Yeah.
The whole thing is just how do we make money, but then you splatter some sort of a mission to make it sound more. Ours is the opposite. We are a mission disguised as a very successful for-profit company. It's true, but that's kind of how my process works.
That's great. And in the phases of transition, so first you have the dissolution of the prior identity, right? Mourning. This is it's the harder part because some of you is dying. But then the second part is creativity, exploration, and that's the part we often skip as entrepreneur because the next one is doing and in action, right? And like it's kind of like we skip into the action and kind of repeat the model. But what we've learned is that if we take the time to explore and to connect to what's really to your passion, then the next mountain can become much more fulfilling. So I'm curious how different is the second mountain from the first? How like the success? How would you define success differently, or how are you differently fulfilled by it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely it's just different in many ways. First of all, I can't believe that I can call it my job to save lives. Like, we have patients, but actually many patients who permanently tattooed this Virta Health logo that I have on. And you're like, this is a for-profit business and you just tattooed the company logo. So anyways, that's as an example. But, tens, hundreds, thousands, we now treated hundreds of thousands of patients come to us and say, you saved my life and you changed the course of our kind of family trajectory, where it's been like 3 generations of people with type 2 diabetes, amputations, deaths. We reverse someone's disease and they're like, well, my kids aren't going to get this anymore. And so that is just the fact that the impact of our work is so transforming of human lives and saving, I would say, in front of our eyes is just a very, very special. Then the other thing is, in the case of Trulia, again, I was so driven by, I just want to build something from scratch and make it to fruition. And so it kind of I knew that, well, I didn't realize at the time, but afterwards, that the excitement and North Star had an expiration date, because once you build it, it's like there. Now I don't know if I'm, the investors and board think that I'm the right CEO to scale this company for another 20 years. I need to earn my kind of right all the time. But the actual motivation and mission doesn't have an expiration date. Like, our mission is reverse metabolic disease in 1 billion people. And this problem is growing faster than so far we've been able to scale. So that's another thing that's very different. It's like, hey, it's kind of like a river that flows. It's a process, and the river is probably going to flow forever. And that's sort of same for our mission, that it's
Yeah.
not like, okay, it's going to be done. Honestly, this work will never be done. And I actually find it very motivating and exciting. I'm not driven by like, oh, it's by Tuesday, 4 p.m., everything needs to be done and then we close the book. Like, no, actually, I'm excited that this could be kind of, forever thing. And again, it may not, I'm very, have humility that I may not be able to do everything and forever, but the mission of the company
Yeah.
is life
Keeps you
way.
connected to the work.
Yeah. Well, I once had a mentor who said the worthwhile purpose is something you can work your whole life towards, and you'll never completely solve it, and yet it will have been a life well lived. And one of the things I think is interesting, Natalia and I, we're really interested in like systems thinking, complexity theory, and especially when you talk about these complex problems, they're not just cause and effect; they're a series of causes and effects that are in the dynamic. And when you talk something like diabetes or metabolic disease, you already name it. It's a food problem, it's a culture problem, it's an agricultural problem, it's an economics problem, it's social problem. So it's very interesting because working with people who are coming from a straight business lens, they approach a problem and often they just say, okay, well, let's do this because that's what they know how to do. But it sounds like what you did is you really saw it from different angle, and you identified the leverage points that you had in your capacity. So I'm just curious. Tell us more about what does your products do, like for people who
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before I go into the very details, it is like Occam's razor, which I love, which is like you need to find a leverage point and understand like the simplest explanation and then go after that. In contrast, if you, even today, if you talk to the population health and biological experts about obesity and type 2 diabetes, they will draw you a diagram that has 500 contributing factors and say it's a multifaceted problem, which is true. But then essentially the conclusion is like, we don't even know what to do, right? Because, oh, there's 500 things and we should have 500. Yeah, 500 factors are, but it's kind of like if you want to become a good runner and run a fast 10K, yeah, there's 500 factors. But let's just be honest, forget the 499. Just run 5 kilometers every day for a month and let's see what happens. Like, you're going to be a better runner. You don't have to worry about the complexities and nutrition and HRV and your sleep and, pollution. And it's like, forget that. Run 5 kilometers every day and you're going to be a faster runner in this anyways. So going back to what we actually do, well, like I mentioned earlier, metabolic disease, which then drives 10 or so chronic conditions, to diabetes, high blood sugar, hypertension, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, and lipids off, and chronic kidney disease, which leads to dialysis and a bunch of others, inflammation. That's a one thing. It is a one thing metabolic disease. And it is fundamentally driven by poor nutrition, which then breaks your metabolism, and you're just hungry all the time, and you're gaining fat and you're getting sicker, but you're just hungry all the time. And hence you end up with, more than half of American adults who are obese. So it is a fundamental food problem, and you can't fix a food problem with drugs. So what Virta does is we use individualized nutrition through behavior change or lifestyle change. So we don't sell food or anything as the therapy. And then it's delivered through telemedicine. So we have doctors, we have coaches. We never touch you physically. So we monitor your biomarkers remotely and use that data to individualize the nutrition recommendation on a near real-time basis to you. And then, of course, adjust your medications. Like in a diabetes, if we can get your blood sugar come down very quickly nutritionally, then we need to pull you off of insulin as opposed to increase. So it's a combination of nutrition through behavior change, and then the way we deliver the care and support you and individualize, which is with technology and AI that has allowed us to literally deliver what I these days call Ozempic-like results without the drug. So 13% average weight loss, 60% of our patients reverse type 2 diabetes, get fully off of insulin, which was thought to be impossible. Like, if you have type 2 diabetes, you have it for the rest of your life, you might be able to manage and keep the blood sugar in check with drugs. Well, we can actually reverse it, get you off the medications. That's how it works. And then last thing I will mention, nutritionally, one fundamental difference with what we do is we don't change how much you eat, we change what you eat. And basically all the approaches over the last 30 years are focused on like the first law of thermodynamics, which is like, if we can just somehow reduce the calories you take in, you can lose weight, you're going to be healthy. Well, guess what? If you're fighting against biology, the willpower runs out latest at the wedding photo. And 100% of nutrition interventions focused on weight loss have failed on average. Obviously, you always have the willpower Olympic gold medalist who can, but 100%, that's why we have this obesity problem. None, zero of nutrition programs and diet programs have worked on average. And average people just keep gaining weight. And we've been able to make it work by not changing how much you eat. In fact, we counsel you to eat the satiety of our patients, and we change what you eat. So it heals your metabolism and insulin resistance. So that's a little bit about kind of what we do. But it's a nutrition-based treatment, and nutrition can heal even the most complex metabolic conditions.
That's great, Sami. It's wonderful. And I'm curious, we skipped quite quickly through the transition. I wonder if we could go back a little bit because you said, I didn't understand my mind, and a lot of things were happening. So I wonder what helped you in this transition. What did you learn from yourself? Any advice you'd like to share to our listeners?
Yeah, well, maybe a couple of things. Well, the first was, as my mind was kind of spiraling, unhappy and worrying about, anxious about silly little things that I didn't even have time to think about when I was working. I quickly realized that, I've trained as an athlete, every muscle in my body for decades by that point. And I had also, educated myself through, whatever, 2 master's degrees, and educated my brain. But I had never actually understood how my mind works. So despite I thought I had kind of taken care of my body and mind or brain in all possible ways and optimized it and this and that, I actually had never understood how my mind works. And I was like, wait a second. There has to be a way to understand this. And I don't remember how I stumbled on it, but pretty much like a month or two later, I was at a 10-day silent meditation retreat in Taiwan. So I will say that meditation has been one of the, or was, and I still meditate, but early was one of the tools. And not in a way like people who don't necessarily meditate kind of think like, oh, it calms your mind and less stress and this. Sure, those are side benefits. But most fundamentally, recognizing the nature of the mind, which is that you kind of tangle your feeling of self and ego to a machine that's really running on its own. And so that's been very liberating to realize that the awareness is different from the brain that's kind of running a show. Oh, sorry, it's not running a show. The brain thinks that it's running a show when in fact it's not. It just kind of operating on its own. And so in that sense, meditation has been kind of a total game changer to realize that. And then of course there's practice. I sometimes say like, yeah, you can be a world-class meditator, and if your foot's hurting, and the problem is that you have a rock in a shoe, just take a freaking rock out. Like you don't need meditation to like, oh my God, my foot's hurting. This is like, I'm fine. It's just a pain and I can live with it. It's like, sure. But sometimes we just have to take the rock out of the shoe. So obviously then I learn also things to take the rock out of the shoe, which is I love creating things. There are things in life that are kind of exciting, and I tend to be a person who is excited about the future and what could be, what should be. And, obviously I love physical sports and stuff. So that was another thing I kind of identified, that even if I'm aware that my brain's kind of running the show and making stuff up and making me happy and unhappy unnecessarily, there are still rocks in the shoe that I can take out. And then there's some things that I can put in there that just I like doing. So that was, I think, the second thing. And then the third thing I will mention that I realize, at least for my mind, if you don't change the routines and the physical space, it's hard to help the mind be very open and creative. And practical example, people might sell their company or whatever, and then they literally go to their same office or home office. They read the same news sources and the same, or some of the same emails come in. Like you're in this kind of same flow of information and the feeling. And what I did with my spouse, it was rowing across the Pacific Ocean. That was 45 days, no email, no nothing, no, we didn't have kids at the time. It was just literally and figuratively white space or blue space with the ocean. And it was incredibly helpful. So that is the one thing that I've recommended for a lot of people in transitioning, which is like, don't commit to anything and find a minimum of 30 days and move to another country. It's very easy. It's very cheap. Get an Airbnb, read totally different news sources, do totally different things, even if it's like painful and uncomfortable, but get yourself out, because the mind is mind is having the show of its own. And if you just keep feeding the same stuff, you're more likely to get the same thoughts and to sort of get distance to your prior life and prior thought patterns. One way is to just get distance to your circles. And the role was super helpful. In fact, I will just a minor anecdote. So I already had this idea for Virta kind of in my mind jumping into the robot. And I knew how to potentially solve this problem, metabolic disease. And so I kind of had it in my mind. But I still was a hesitant to jump in and start a company, which I knew was the right tool for this mission, reverse metabolic disease in 1 billion people. And that role helped me to change my mind essentially. And one thing that and again, it's like white space and most of these are like emotional learnings. I don't think you can solve this in a spreadsheet. You kind of have to feel it. And the one thing I felt in a row was because it's very uncomfortable. It's cold. Theoretically, at least you could die. I estimated we took 1 million aura strokes each, 1 million to get from California to Hawaii. And that was 1 million times a moderate level of pain, like literally. And I was like, this is hard. What I came to realize during that pain, I guess, well, first of all, the best way to get out of pain, this is sort of a meditation trick, is you give in and you accept versus like, oh my God, I can't wait
Fighting it. Yeah.
100,000 more and then I'm going to be in a sofa. It's going to be awesome. 30 more days. Like you're going to be miserable. Like you want to keep into it. But what I realized was that the periods in my life where I've been uncomfortable and pushing myself a little bit to the edge, but not over, have been most fulfilling and gratifying, kind of on average. And so when I stepped off the boat in Waikiki Beach in Hawaii in August of 2014, immediately at that second, I'm like, it is time to go. I'm going to go and build this company to solve this problem, no matter how hard it is, because I should not be running away from like uncomfortable feelings. In fact, I should be running towards it. So that was a big aha for me during the role. And I don't think I would have sipping espresso in a blue bottle coffee in San Francisco. I don't think I would. I actually like sipping espresso and reading a newspaper for 4 hours. Like, why would I go and start a company? And we all know, like being an entrepreneur, it's more often than not, it's like eating broken glass every day.
Ouch. Yeah. No, it's true. You're pointing to a paradox. We're always seeking comfort, but that does not bring you joy or fulfillment. It's actually more, being busy, being in pain, being in service. That's why we really invite people to think about how they can contribute, because usually when you're in service and contributing to something bigger than you, then you put yourself in situations of pain because it doesn't matter, right? The North Star is more important, and then you can find meaning.
And by the way, the things that people use to kind of soothe themselves or relax, which hopefully is in alcohol and drugs and whatnot.
Yeah.
Whether that's watching a movie or walking in nature with your spouse or playing with your kids or whatever that is, that feels 100 times more amazing when you've been doing this kind of hard, whatever you're fulfilling. And it's
true.
a very obvious thing, but it's kind of like why weekends or you do something can feel so awesome because you have this contrast of like, but if you have weekend every day, well, we know you've spoken.
We get used to it.
Weekend every day, guess what?
Yeah.
Very few people are actually having fun after, 14 weekends in a row.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting. I read, maybe you're aware, there's the book called Dopamine Nation, this really great author, and she talks exactly about that hedonic cycle. And I've experienced that too. I've done these 10-day Vipassana retreat, and you come out and it's like everything's so beautiful, and you feel like just meeting someone is like a miracle, but you can only get there because you've gone through some hardship.
Yeah. By the way, again, going back to our role, you can imagine that there's no bathroom, there's no bed to sleep. So once you come out of it, it was kind of like a resetting the hedonistic cycle. Quite honestly, I remember just walking on a road, clean road with no shoes, no socks, just to feel that, which I never do. And this sounds even more because I'm not really like completely woo-woo tree hugger, but I had to like hug a tree. It was just like feeling something physical nature, because you ocean, like you have nothing, just water.
Yes.
So, but those are, as you mentioned, um, having those contrasts and resets, it's incredibly helpful. And I think in this kind of process of maybe trying to discover your next thing, having those contrast even more, I think is helpful for the mind to then sort of discover your next whatever North Star or mountain to climb.
Mhm. And probably it allows you to know yourself better, because that's the key too. Is how do you understand your mind and therefore yourself? What
Yeah.
triggers you? What yeah, where you find passion, when you find energy. Yeah. And I'm curious, anyone helped you along? Well, I mean, your partner did for sure. Anyone else? Any mentors? And how did your relationships evolve through that transition? Because we see that often the relationships from the first mountain, let's say their first company, or there's a disconnection. There's a lot of loneliness, and so it's finding new people is often key to feeling better. Yeah. How was that for you?
Yeah, I guess I got lucky in many ways. I'll just mention a couple of examples. So one, I've been a member of YPO as a Young Presidents Organization since 2008. So I had that like YPO forum, and the group was with me before, during, after. So that was one kind of consistent thing. Another one was, which I didn't mention earlier, but in this transitioning period, I started doing angel investments within the category that I cared, which again was human health, wellness, performance. And then it was lonely, but then I decided to join as kind of, I guess I was called venture partner, kind of a VC firm. So I was sitting at their office, I guess, working like 2 days a week. So I saw that was another thing. But I will say the third one, probably the most helpful, was that my spouse, my wife, was actually very, very interested in the same topics, like solving metabolic health crisis. And so she actually ended up essentially almost being like a founder, one of the very, very first employees of Virta Health as well. Obviously, we had gotten married before, but we worked together 6 years or so before she retired from her role. So that actually was very, very helpful to have that support. So we were kind of in sync um, as my kind of transitioning and going from one total different thing to another. Then it was very, very helpful. So we didn't have any issues of like, me as kind of someone being jobless and restless and unhappy and grumpy and whatnot. Like it, in fact, a lot of these things flowed together, and we were able to support each other. And it was almost like starting an exciting new adventure together, kind of a thing, which I think was very helpful. But I guess it's kind of the same thing what I tell founders, particularly founder CEOs, when they are building, that it is incredibly important not to let your company be the one and only thing, and have your identity. You just have that one identity. I'm a founder. I'm a CEO, a tech founder. Thing. Have your friends, have your whatever spouse, or have your hobby, maybe another identity, whether it's YPO or something. First of all, it's like a portfolio. Like if you're failing in one, maybe there's one or two might still be okay. So you feel better about yourself. Second, it's kind of like a psychological escape. Okay, you're CEO or whatever, and then you're a parent, or you're CEO and then you're a friend, you're CEO, then you're an athlete, and you're gonna have that portfolio each week. I find it's very helpful. It's very, again, it kind of refreshes your mind, get other ideas. I think that same thing is helpful in a transitioning, that as much as you want to have white space to find your next, to have some consistency of other people and other interest or peer
Areas of
group
your life.
going. Because if the only thing you've had is I'm a CEO of this, and then it goes to zero and you have nothing else, and you're a CEO of nothingness, that's how you end up
It's really
in,
hard. Yeah.
I don't know, bacon,
Yeah.
doing bad things.
So you mentioned the word North Star. I like that a lot, especially given that you're a Nordic person. So it adds even more meaning to that. We also live in Canada, so we know something about snow and cold. I'm looking forward what you're doing with your current venture. What's your North Star? Where are you seeing this going, and what would you like to see happen?
Yeah, well, honestly, the North Star is the mission, which is reverse metabolic disease in 1 billion people. And I think, and that's sort of a never-ending mission. But what I would want, I guess the legacy is a heavy word, but legacy of Virta to be is simply that um, we would change today's common sense thing in treating metabolic disease. Let's say type 2 diabetes as an example. Today, the common sense thing when you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes is like, oh, here's diabetes drugs like insulin, and we'll add it, and eventually we'll cut your legs off, and maybe you become blind, and you'll probably die from a heart attack. This is the common sense thing. This is the common sense. It's like, oh, too bad, just take your drugs, so all these bad things happen in 18 years as opposed to 15. That is a common sense thing. So I would want our legacy to be, you have metabolic disease, such as type 2 diabetes. Don't you worry. This is 100% reversible. This is what you do. So I would want nutrition first, reversal of a metabolic to become a common sense thing. And which sounds like blatantly obvious, but literally you can go to an American Diabetes Association website today. This is an American nonprofit, but it's kind of the voice of diabetes care and guidelines globally. And you cannot find that message from the website, or at
Wow.
least not on the page. It's like, oh my God, too bad. We are looking for cure and doing research. We know that there's an evidence systematic, and this, you don't need to be a willpower expert. We've been successful with Native American tribes, truck drivers, poor people, rich people, same results. There's a way out of. So that I think would be amazing if we can change the common sense thing with metabolic disease. It's not the chronic progressive. You're going to die from it, suffer. We can reverse it with nutrition, at least for most people. So I think that'd be amazing. And the more we scale, I think the more likely that is to happen. Because eventually you just can't hide the truth. It's like, wait a second. I think we were wrong for 30 years thinking diabetes is some miraculous thing that appears and then you have it. Like, no, it is a food problem. We can fix it. Let's stop fooling ourselves.
That's great, Sami. It's very inspiring. And there's many people in our network that are interested in solving health issues. So I'm sure they'll like to hear your story, and hopefully it will bring them some ideas and ways in which they can tackle the issues they care for. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and yesterday I was at a entrepreneur event, and we were uh, having a shared conversation about how like to get back from being in love with what you're doing to like who you're doing it for. And one of the things that came up is like, especially when it's something you've experienced yourself and you feel like, I don't want other people to suffer like I have. You mentioned that as a very fit person, you had yourself like, oh my God, pre-diabetic. So how did that play a role in you wanting to solve that problem, I guess, right?
Yeah. So one thing I often say to entrepreneurs, like, I'm like, how do I get an idea? And what should I start? I'm like, listen, I worked at McKinsey, so I know how to do spreadsheet analysis and left brain, like, solve problems. I know, but that is not the right approach to find the idea that you want to build a company around. Why is that? It's because the absolutely unfair competitive advantage that a founder can have is that they unexplainably fall in love with the idea or the approach of the North Star. Unexplainably fall in love because the energy and the motivation that comes from like this intrinsic bone marrow level, I want to do this, I have to, whatever that driver is, you can't take that away. And you kind of need that when you're building. If it's just an intellectual exercise, kind of like, okay, A plus B, oh, looks like, we need, AI for spell checking emails. It's just you're gonna give up at some point. And that is very different for every person. It's life experience and life happenstance or whatever. It's very, very different. And I often use the analogy when I talk to, I don't know, first time entrepreneurs, early entrepreneurs. I'm like, I'm sure everyone has at least once fallen in love. Like you have dates with people and then you have a date and you're like, I don't care what happens. I'm going to drive 300 kilometers, pull an all-nighter. I don't even sleep. Like, I want to go and meet this person again. Like most people have had that feeling. That energy, like if you can tap into that, like nothing's going to stop you. And you can have that with at least some level of that when you're kind of building a company. And I think that's, or starting, it doesn't need to be a company. And for every person, that's different. I think that would be my advice for anyone. Look for that feeling and then chase that, because it's an awesome place. Again, going back to where we started the conversation, 100% optionality. Oh, I can do anything at any point in time. Kind of miserable versus you find a thing like the date with the person where you're like, oh my God, I am like in love, head over heels. That is way better feeling than, well, I guess I could date anyone and you're miserable. And
I
so
like
it's
the
the same.
metaphor. Yes.
Yeah. Find that. And you can't explain it. And for some, that's, I don't know, saving lost dogs, and
Yeah.
fine and
Yeah.
do it.
Mm.
And for others, it's, I don't know, I guess living in Mars.
Let's not talk about this person.
I have a question for you that's a bit it's a bit off topic, but I just finished Strength to Strength from Arthur C. Brooks, and he's a sociologist, I believe, and anyway, he's a very smart researcher that writes about happiness, science of happiness, among other things. And Strength to Strength is about the second part of your life and how to make make the most out of it, right? And he speaks of two types of intelligence, and I wonder if you've noticed that, or if you can attest to that. But so, because I wonder how that plays into choosing maybe your next mountain, right? So the first intelligence, it's called fluid
Crystal,
intelligence. The crystal is the second one, right? So the first one is more fluid, and I think it relates more to what an entrepreneur needs. So it's a bit more, there's creativity, there's innovation, also there's speed, and there's, data and being in action. And that's the one you have in the early part of your life. And quite quickly, like depending on what the profession is, 35, 40, it starts declining. So really early. And then the crystallized intelligence is the one we have in the second part of our life, which is more about complex thinking, seeing the whole, also teaching, storytelling, connecting the dots, um, learning languages and remembering languages, for example, is one as well. So it's, if you know that, maybe the role you want to have in your second mountain is a bit different, right? And so I wonder, have you noticed any of that? Does it play into how you show up at Virta today versus how you were in the first company, or maybe not? Just
yeah.
curious.
Oh, I do think to some extent, yes. I'll just give a little bit of a somewhat related example. I was playing this memory card game with my 10-year-old daughter last night, where I think, there's like pairs. There are lots
Yes.
of cards upside down. There's pairs, and you flip and try to remember, oh, that picture I've seen. So basically, you need to find the matching pairs, but you have to remember where the one card was. She 100% destroyed me. Like I had absolute no zero. I think I got like 4 pairs. She got like 24 or something. And I was just like, I cannot believe, well, I guess I can believe. But anyway, it was just a reminder that the brains work very differently. Like her memory, zero to, and I have a pretty good memory. I can memorize a lot of stuff, but it was just so, anyway, so the brain certainly evolves. And it was like a 10-year, she just destroyed, which was great. Destroyed me. I think, yeah, how has it changed? Well, I think of it through the lens of like, what are my like preferences, what I like to do. And obviously my role now is an operator, founder, as it has been. I started my first company 2000, and then Trulia 2004, 5. So that's 25. I've been basically doing the same thing, if you will, for 25 years. That's a pretty long time. I would say, so my role is still the same, but I can tell that my interests are a little bit changing. And maybe I'm biased by the priming, because I've read these books, in that the kind of teaching and coaching and storytelling is way more interesting now than, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And maybe it's natural. I didn't have much to teach because I was just desperate trying to learn something. But now, like, I write a team letter to the whole company once a week. I've written 530 of them now for Virta as an example. I like to, when other founders, entrepreneurs ping me, I'm very happy to have conversations with them to help them with and I actually like that. I can tell that it's fulfilling to like, sure, I'll tell you what you should expect from your board, which is not much. Usually. So yeah, I would say my preferences definitely have changed more towards, I guess, being a teacher versus the doer, I would say. Um, I still have a huge bias for kind of solving a problem and getting to the right answer that's incredibly satisfying. Like math, I like because there's an explicit answer. Like I don't like human psychology because there's no explicit answer. So I think that's just the wiring that hasn't changed for me. But yeah, I do think there's a change. And then, when you're building a company, it's like professional sports. You have to make sure that you use your skills and natural skills and tendencies optimally. So I have tried to be constantly aware that the things that I'm best at that nobody else can do, I'll do more of that. And then things that are like, yeah, I can kind of do them, but may not be that exciting. And I can do as well as an average good professional, then maybe have someone else do more of those. So I try to be conscious about that.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. It's nice that you were able to stay in a similar role, but still you shape it to how your energy and your passion is evolving and your brain is evolving, basically. So, yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Sami. It's been lovely as a conversation. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to share as a last tip or advice to our listeners, anything we haven't covered.
Or call to action.
Yeah. Yeah, we're a call to action. Yeah.
Well, anyone who's in the middle of transitioning, I guess I would just hope it's there is light at the end of a tunnel, and it is not a train. Um, and maybe maybe the universal, I would say, take a step, like start doing something without no direction that's going to take you. I think is very, very helpful. And then kind of ideas, excitement, emotions follow action, I believe. So rather than sort of ruminating and trying to be in front of the whiteboard, trying to be like, what do I do next? Just doing something, even if it's like, well, I'm not quite sure if this can go anywhere, but do something. And then you learn and discover and meet people. And I think, and it doesn't need to be rowing across the Pacific. It could be something much.
Thank you. That's great advice. It's like Marie-France always says, we learn in action, right? So
For sure.
find that
For
action.
sure, clarity comes from action. So anyway, it's been really lovely to meet you and to talk to you today.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Sami.
Thanks.
Thank you.